Today's episode has been brought to you by Schedulicity
and Pelvic Health Professionals. This is where you can access the most up-to-date pelvic health information. I'm so excited, Connected Yoga Teachers, because this month our guest speaker was Carolyn Van Dyken, and very soon Shelley Prosco is our Q&A person. So we actually have 2 pelvic health experts coming into the membership to answer our questions. Carolyn talked about pelvic floor engagement, really guided us through what a good pelvic floor engagement or good Kegel, what the cues are for that, and then also talked to us about when and when not to be cueing pelvic floor engagement. And our call that's coming up with Shelley is just a general Q&A. This is where we get to ask any and all questions to our guest experts, everything from pelvic health to how they run their business as a pelvic health professional. You can access these calls and everything else in our growing library over at pelvichealthprofessionals.com. If you are new here or if you are a returning listener, hello and welcome. This is the Connected Yoga Teacher podcast, and I'm your host, Shannon Crow. I use she, her pronouns. I'm a Canadian, and I am trying to work on really thinking about acknowledging and learning about what it means when I live on Indigenous land here on Turtle Island and when all of my ancestors are immigrants. I've been sharing some random facts here on the podcast, and one of my favorite things is hearing your personal stories based on this. A few weeks back, I talked about my Cabbage Patch doll, and many of you have reached out with stories of Cabbage Patch dolls, Garbage Pail Kids, My Little Pony. These are people who are in my generation. Pound puppies. There were so many toys, and I was thinking, oh my gosh, this is really bringing me back to my childhood. And this week's random fact is a childhood story. So when I was a kid, my dad would, I know this sounds like we had no internet. That's true. I know it sounds like we didn't have a lot of entertainment, which is probably true. But my dad would put newspaper on the table, and then we would bring either slugs or snails into the house and put them on the newspaper and watch them. I remember doing this as a kid. We put them back. Maybe it was traumatic for the snails or the slugs, but for me, it was this moment where we really slowed down and observed a snail or a slug and how they get their little, I don't even know what they're called. Their little stretchy eyes that come out. Are they eyes? I don't think those are their eyeballs. If anyone is a snail expert, let me know. And we would watch them crawl across and really just observe them. And I love doing this out in nature. I really was encouraged to do this when I was a kid, and also encourage my kids to do that. And I encourage all of you to go out and check out nature. If you do, tag me in an Instagram story or a Facebook post if you are out taking pictures or videos or just noticing nature. I love to hear what you're doing when you're listening to the podcast as well. So maybe you're listening to this as you're outside in nature right now. I'm also a mom of 3, a yoga teacher, podcaster, and founder of Pelvic Health Professionals. And this podcast was created for you so that each and every week, as you are on the go, going between classes or, setting things up for your classes or uploading your videos, whatever you're doing, you can connect to the information and inspiration that will support you as you build your unique yoga business. I do not have to tell yoga teachers this. The pandemic has forced a lot of us online, and I know that for many of us, it's been a steep learning curve. There's always more to learn about online things. And we've talked a lot on the podcast about teaching online via Zoom and on video, and I'll link in the show notes here to a full resource page that Crunch created. Crunch and Erica both worked on this, where you can find any resources to teach online yoga. And this week, I wanted to share with you a less talked about alternative to video, but a great alternative for any yoga teacher. And this is audio recordings. I have Claire Villarreal on the podcast today, and she has such a great topic to talk about, such a lot of information on this as well, and I can't wait to share it with all of you. A little bit more about Claire. She works to adapt traditional Buddhist teachings for the demands of modern life, particularly focusing on guided meditations. She began meditating daily in 1997 and has traveled to Thailand, India, and Nepal to study and meditate in traditional settings. She's the former programs director for Dawn Mountain Center for Tibetan Buddhism and former board member for Compassionate Houston. Currently, Claire contributes to a GenX Dharma teachers community, and she's funded by the Hemera Foundation to write and podcast about what Tibetan teachings on reincarnation can teach us about living well. Claire gets a lot of questions on how she creates her meditation tracks. And in this interview, she explains how to record good quality audio with only a phone and a set of earbuds, software you can use to transcribe your meditations, how to edit and store your audio, what format to save it in, and more technical details. If you're not already using or familiar with the tech of audio recordings, this episode is made for you. And this is so applicable if you are trying to set up a freebie for your students where they can sign up for your email list and get an audio recording of your teachings. Or if your students would like a special gift to take home. Think of how many times students say to us, "Oh, I wish I could have this guided shavasana to take home with me," or this guided meditation, or how you talk us through this movement sequence in yoga. And this is a way to really offer that to your students. And before we dive in further, I want to say a huge thank you to our sponsor, Schedulicity.
Hello, Connected Yoga teachers. This is Ren with the Schedulicity Hot Tip of the Week. Once you have an email and content strategy, Schedulicity makes it a breeze to commit and follow through. The client communications tool allows you to send email messages to your clients and use their Schedulicity booking history to filter them into groups. It's never been easier to target your emails and market directly to the people who are most interested in your content. Keep that personal touch without sacrificing your personal time.
Thank you so much, Team Schedulicity, for making today's podcast possible, and also for supporting the many yoga studios and teachers as they book all of the different things, all of the classes and workshops and everything that they are putting together as they get their bookings and keeping their calendar in line. It's amazing the work that you do. Also, over in our show notes, Connected Yoga Teachers, there is a coupon code for you if you want to sign up and try Schedulicity, or if you are an existing customer and you want to get 2 months of free access. You can go to the connectedyogateacher.com/244. I also want to give a huge shout out to Dominique, who left a voice message after listening to the podcast. I reached out, got Dominique's permission to share this. Let's have a listen to what Dominique says.
Hey, Shannon, this is Dominique Gauthier, leaving you a voice message because you always say how much you love them, and I haven't had an opportunity to leave one up until this moment. And I wanted to share with you about my very first car after catching up with some of the recent podcasts. So my very first car is currently in the shop. It is a 2009 Volkswagen Beetle, and it was a special edition in this heavenly blue color. And it's just this very light kind of grayish blue color. It's beautiful. And I got my first car with my very first good paying acting job, because back then I was still acting, and I used that to put a really good deposit down. And it was essentially a gift to myself. It was right around my 24th birthday. And up until then, I was taking a Greyhound bus to go to all of my auditions. And I'd always take a bus before the one that would get me there on time. So it was 2 hours before the one that would get me there on time. And it never failed. I always just missed the bus on the way home. And around then, I was sometimes going to Toronto 2 or 3 times a week, which is like 2 hours away from where I am. So I still own it. It's still kicking, barely sometimes I feel like. But yeah, aside from that, I love the podcast. I love all the work that you do in this world. Thank you for being you and for sharing all of your knowledge and wisdom with us.
Oh my goodness. Thank you so much, Dominique, for sharing this voicemail. Yes, I do love to get voice messages, and anyone can do this over at theconnectedyogateacher.com. Our website, on the right-hand side, there's a voicemail button, and let me know if we have permission to share it on the podcast. Yes, this is the same Dominique who walked us through how to really up our game when it comes to online yoga and streamlining the process. Thank you so much for doing that, Dominique, and for continuing to share. I love that you have your first car and it's still running. I was actually watching Dominique's stories recently and checked in and said, hey, is this the car that you just talked about in a message to me? I see it's at the shop again, but I can tell in all of your messages about your car, Dominique, that you absolutely love and care for this car so much. And thanks for sharing that with us. Alrighty, Connected Yoga Teachers, let's dive right into today's interview with Claire and learn all about how we can create audio recordings to showcase and share our yoga. Welcome to the Connected Yoga Teacher podcast, Claire. It's great to have you here.
Thank you so much for having me on. I'm really delighted to be here.
I am excited that we get to talk about making audio accessible for our yoga students who want to have a listen to maybe a meditation or a shavasana or a yoga class. But before we dig into that, tell us, what's the work that you do and who do you do it for?
Sure. So my day job, so to speak, is creating online courses and content and doing live workshops and instruction too. So you can find my work at clairevillarreal.com. But I've found that, I have a lot of friends also who are meditation teachers or yoga teachers, and people often ask, like, how do you create these, guided meditations or whatever? And I'm like, it's so easy. So that's kind of what led me to start creating some resources for people who want to also share guided meditations.
Oh, that's nice. I'm glad that you think that it's so easy, because I think there's this huge missed opportunity from our yoga teachers right now. The moment they say, okay, I've got my website, I know I need to build my email list. What should my freebie be? I automatically think of audio. You probably do as well. And then they just hit that like, oh gosh, I think it's too hard to do that. Or how do I do that?
Yeah, totally. And, I think the thing is, like, for me, when I started, so I should back up and say I actually worked for my Dharma center, Dawn Mountain Center for Tibetan Buddhism in Houston, Texas, for several years. So I was doing a lot of online streaming and, just a lot of like higher budget stuff with audio and video. And when I wanted to start my own podcast, I started by looking at all these different like expensive recorders, and you have to have a mixer, and here's the audio editing software, and it costs like hundreds of dollars. And honestly, now that I've been at it for a while, like years now, you do not need that stuff. You can get started with your phone. There's free audio editing software, and there are just some simple tips that can make audio you record with your phone. It's not going to sound studio quality necessarily, but it's going to be great. It's going to be really good for students. There are free ways to mix in even music with your meditations. So I think it's way more accessible than people think.
Oh my goodness. So tell us, if we have our phone, what is the quickest way that we could get started with that then to have it sound good?
Sure. So basically, there's some basic rules of like audio recording. And if it were me and I had no equipment right now, I would take my phone, I would go into a closet or a bathroom or someplace where you can have soft materials in front of your face, absorbing all the echoes that, a hard surface like a floor or ceiling can create. I would take my earbuds and plug them in and use an audio recording app on the phone and just start playing with it, because it is a trial and error process. I want to say that. It'll probably take recording some test recordings a few times to get your setup right, but once you have your setup the way you want it, it's pretty easy to just go back in and record another episode.
That's amazing. I love that you said like our phone, like most of us nowadays, maybe aside from my dad with his flip phone, most of us have a phone where we can record some audio. And I've even done this in one-on-one sessions with yoga students when especially there was a time where I was working with a lot of brain injury, people with brain injuries. And so I would record it so that they could play it back at home and be led if, say, a visual wasn't the best way to convey that message. So then let's say someone records it on their phone. They have a set of earbuds, I'm guessing, with the microphone built in, and they figure out where does that have to be. Like I've seen some people loop it across their ear so that the microphone is right in front of their mouth.
Yeah, okay, so this is, I think, one of the few key things that you have to figure out before you really start, producing audio. You have to figure out the right relationship between the microphone and your mouth, because if you get it too close, you're going to get all the P sounds, a lot of popping sounds, and if you get it too far, you're going to have a bunch of just background noise.
Right.
So if you experiment, I like to actually record like a first draft of a meditation while I'm actually practicing or guiding a practice. So in that case, you just plug in your earbud, let it hang wherever it hangs, just get a first draft so you can listen back to that guided meditation. But it can also kind of help to show you, okay, what are the audio qualities of that space that you just recorded in? How was the relationship between your mouth and the phone? But it gives you something to listen back to. And if you want to make changes to that meditation, you can change it before you create a script and whatnot. But yeah, I would say it's good to have your phone maybe about 6 inches from your mouth if you're going to use the onboard microphones of your phone.
Okay.
It's actually, I think, not bad just to let your microphone hang down past your mouth, because what you really don't want is to get the plosives, the P's and the B's. You don't want to get those showing up on your recording. So I think it's better to have it a little further away rather than closer. And in the editing phase, you can take out some of that background noise that you'll get if it's a little further away from your mouth.
Okay. So then if we have this audio, and this is the point where I don't know, because I send my audio, I just send notes on like right at this spot right here, somebody swore or the dog barked or like something happened or I just lost my train of thought and there's a long pause. So I send those to Suzanne, but she does all of the magic. I have no idea what she does with it. So how could we do this ourselves then?
Sure. Well, I actually kind of have a whole process that I go through these days. If I can explain it to you if you'd like, because it kind of relates to what you're going to end up editing in the editing process.
Sure.
So basically, I mentioned that I like to record a meditation that I'm just doing like live, off the cuff. I want to get it on tape, so to speak, so I can listen through it and see what I want to change. And the way I like to do that is actually with this app called Otter. It's a voice transcription app, but the really cool thing about it is that when you record something to transcribe, so like you open the app, you start a recording, it'll transcribe it live, but it also records the audio. So when you play it back later, sometimes any transcribing software is just going to completely miss certain words, especially if it's a Sanskrit word or something that it's not familiar with. So as you play it back online, you can actually hear the recording as you're seeing the transcription and you can fix those errors. So I like to use Otter. You can also use basically any word processing app that you have on your phone. You can just open a document and set it to start transcribing.
I love that you shared Otter. I just learned about this and we're going to be covering this on the podcast at some point, of how to make yoga more accessible, and it can actually do the transcribing live so that if you're on Zoom and you have people attending who can't hear audio or don't connect with audio or don't learn that way, that they can see the words going across the screen. Also, I want to tell you that my brother I kept bugging him. I was like, I need this tool. Like, I need this thing. I go through the audio and I'm like pausing in Dropbox. And so I need a transcription tool. And my brother is a software engineer and he created one.
Wow.
And yesterday he's like, you can start telling people about it now.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, what good timing.
I know. It's called Podsy. I can make sure that I link to it in the show notes and I'd be happy to share it with you because he's right at that phase where he's like, give me some feedback of how I can improve the tool.
Oh my gosh, yeah, I would love to beta test it.
Yeah. Connected Yoga teachers, I wanted to pop in here for a moment and just let you know that we have a couple of updates since we recorded this episode, since Claire and I spoke. So one is the episode that we did with Landon Stacy. I'll make sure that we link to it in our show notes. And this was such a good podcast episode. And there's also a video to go along with it. And Landon created a whole PDF as well to go along with this to set up closed captioning for your yoga classes. We have used this over in pelvic health professionals a lot. It's so handy to be able to offer this to people to make whatever you're doing on Zoom more accessible. So that might be a yoga class, it might be a talk, it might be a workshop. It's something that's provided on Zoom. It's free. If you're already using Zoom, I would definitely check it out. And I also wanted to tell you about the tool that my brother created. So my brother is a software engineer. He has a full-time job. He's also very busy just in his life, just doing his regular things. But I, as his sometimes bossy sister, I asked him, I didn't tell him to do it. I asked him if he could help me to create some kind of a tool that would help us with our transcription for the podcast in a way that I could annotate. So take notes as I'm looking at the audio and give notes to our team. So he went ahead and created this tool, and it has gone above and beyond what I had anticipated, what I had envisioned. I'm so excited for what it's doing. For example, if you are creating an audio transcript the way Claire is talking about, it definitely works for that. Another thing that he's added to it is that it is becoming searchable. So let's say in pelvic health professionals, we're about to release this, so you're the first to know. We have done hours and hours and hours and hours of calls with guest experts on the topic of pelvic health, which is amazing. And if someone wants to now go and search, let's say pelvic floor, and they want to learn everything they can about the pelvic floor or down-regulating the nervous system, they can type those words in and find every single spot where we talked about that in every call that we've done. So this is an amazing tool. Like I said, it's gone above and beyond. I'll make sure that we put a link in the show notes. My brother's name is Conrad. And if you have any feedback as you're using this, he is listening. He's listening to podcasters, yoga teachers, just anyone who wants to use a transcription tool like this. And I'm bugging him to come on the podcast and talk about how amazing it is as well. So let me know if you're interested in that. Okay, let's get back to the interview with Claire. And I get what you're saying of watching the words. This is how I do the podcast audio, that I watch and it will pull out like big spaces. It will mark those, or my ums, which can be a lot of the time. Although I realize that my ums are actually so is my like
Right.
I just fit in other words. So once we do this and we see we use this transcription, what does that offer then? What do you do with that transcription?
Okay, so this for me is what has really taken the stress out of recording guided meditations, because I want them to sound like my words, but when I'm doing it live, there are the ums and I just make weird mistakes and stuff. So what that transcription offers is that now you have a Word document or whatever kind of document you want that you can edit, shift around stuff you need to shift around, make the whole thing make sense. Like choose all the words you want to use, and then you just read your own words basically as you're recording your meditation. And I know a lot of people, want to have a script for their meditations, but if you write the script, you don't say the script, it doesn't necessarily sound natural. So to me, that's like the big benefit of using this transcription step of the process, is that you're not either like going off the cuff or reading something that doesn't quite sound like it would if you were actually guiding it live.
This is so true. I script parts of the podcast and I realize now like I might read it and then I just say it completely different because
Right.
but I had to learn that over the years. And I know when I first started the podcast, I would be like, oh, I don't want this to sound like I'm reading it. But I love how you're flipping this, that we're not writing the script out first, that we're really saying it. I think yoga teachers get into a real groove of like being in that moment as they're leading a class, teaching a class, or in their own yoga space, and then able to share all kinds of great guided meditations or shavasana or whatever. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think for a lot of us, I'm a meditation instructor, but for yoga instructors too, you're probably leading these all the time. So all you have to do is get your app going, record something, and you have the beginning of a script that you can then edit. And I only do this process, I should say, for like meditations that are really important to me, or I'm going to use them in a course, or I feel like, oh, this just like hit a need for me personally. I think it's going to hit a need for other people. So it takes a long time to do this, but I think the final product that I get is something I'm much happier with than if I just try and do it off the top of my head or, write a script.
Oh, that's amazing.
But yeah, I mean, the magic happens when you're teaching students, or the magic happens when you are meditating. And I think to be able to capture that and then just polish it, to me, is what really, that's the thing I really like about this part of the process.
Oh, that is so cool. So we could do this as we're teaching a class and hit record on our phone there. No one would even know. And then we just use that for the transcription. All right.
Absolutely.
So then how do you edit the audio once you have the transcription and you redo it again? Like, where do you record it? Let's say you recorded it on your phone, but then you're like, okay, I could take this home to my computer. Where might you record it then?
Yeah. Well, so first of all, just, a word about recording. We've already talked a little bit about, recording in a space that has lots of soft surfaces, not recording in a large room. With the pandemic, so many people are recording in their closets, which is a great space. Mm-hmm. The other day, I was in a bathroom and I just kind of hung a towel in front of me and spoke to the towel. So any place that's going to absorb, echoey sound, you can do your recording there. And then the next step is what I like to do is if I'm going to invest the time in creating this meditation, I want to have a copy of that raw recording that I make. So basically, to record the meditation, I would take this script, and you can do this just on your phone, or if you have a tablet or some other type of device that you can have with you in your recording space. You've edited your script, and now you have it in front of you, and you're just recording as you read it. And there's a reason that, I think it's better to read the script off a screen, which is that if you have papers in your hand and you're rustling them, you're definitely going to get that on the recording. Exactly. Yeah, so recording it off a screen in your quiet space onto your phone, you've actually invested some time already. So what I like to do is to just, I use an app called RecForge Pro. I have an Android, but there's tons of different apps. I recommend testing out any given app because some of them, if they come pre-installed, they might cut you off at 10 minutes. So you think you've recorded a 30-minute meditation and you got 10 minutes. So I just recommend installing it, just doing some test recordings before you invest the time in recording 30 minutes or however long your meditation is. But then once you have that recording, I like to upload it to Google Drive. That's who I've sold my soul to. But if you sold your soul to Apple or Dropbox, whatever cloud service you like, you just upload that raw recording, and you can have a folder to keep all the raw recordings of your guided meditations, and then a separate folder to have the edited ones. So that's how I like to kind of transfer the file from my phone to my computer. You just download it to your computer from the cloud then. The other thing you can do if internet access is an issue is you can just, plug in your phone directly to your computer and just transfer the file. You have them locally. So the next step, or should I say anything else about
Well, I'm
recording
curious,
and
what was
transferring?
that app what does that app do that you talked about? I feel like I can't repeat the name of it. So whoever named it, you might want to reconsider it.
Yeah, I did a little bit of research and found it's called RecForge 2 Pro. If you search on like the Google Store or the Play, Apple, whatever, if you search on there, you'll find a lot of different recording apps. And I think the thing to do is to just try out the free version. Part of the reason that I like this RecForge app is that you can actually see the waveforms on your screen. So if you're getting background noise, you'll see it showing up there.
Okay. That's important.
But with it's super helpful for just not ending up with a long track that is useless. The other thing is, if possible, it's great to record in a WAV format instead of MP3 because the WAV format is just richer. And as you edit that audio, I don't think it matters that much for spoken word. I think it's more relevant for music, but it gives you a nicer sound.
Right.
Slightly higher audio quality.
I think this is what my audio editor tells me. She tells me things like this. Okay, Shannon, can you do this?
Right.
Sure.
And WAV files are larger, so there's kind of a downside, but it's better for editing.
Okay. I'm curious, do you record on your phone normally or do you record to something else? Like right now, I know that you're recording your own track. What do you use now?
So I actually, thanks to a grant from the Hemera Foundation supporting female dharma teachers, thank you, Hemera, I have a really sweet Zoom H4n Pro recorder. But Zoom makes a whole line of recorders, digital audio recorders, starting at about $100 or even maybe less than that US. And there are other recorders you can get starting at about $90 US that can really increase the audio quality. But you don't need to get those.
Right.
But basically, the recorder that I'm using, it costs about $250 US, and it's basically a professional grade microphone. So you have a lot of different options at different price points if you want to get more, serious about audio.
Right. Connected Yoga teachers, I wanted to pop in and say we've gotten so many questions about what microphone to use to teach online yoga. And so if you are looking for a compilation of ideas from other yoga teachers, Crunch has put a whole article together for you on this. I'll link to it in the show notes. All right, let's get back into our interview with Claire. Okay, so then once we have that audio and we've uploaded it somewhere, that's a good point to upload it somewhere so you have it. Where do you edit that?
Yeah. Okay, so actually I want to say one last thing about recording before I talk about editing.
Yeah.
I'm going to talk about this app, Audacity, that's multi-platform. It's free, it's open source, it's great, and a lot of, pretty serious like podcasters or even some people working professionally with sound use it, so it's awesome. You can record audio directly on Audacity. So you might be thinking like, why would I even use a phone? Why not just, get a USB mic or even record it onto the microphone with your computer? The reason I don't like that option is that you get audio artifacts from your computer. Like if the fan is going to cool your computer, you might get that showing up in the sound. And I just find it's much trickier to try and record clean audio on your computer versus your phone. So I just want to say that for anyone who's like, I'm going to try it. Go ahead and try it. Maybe your computer will work well with it. But I found, for instance, I have to unplug my laptop. I can't put it on certain types of surfaces. If I do all these things, then I'll get a pretty good recording on Audacity, but it's just easier on your phone.
I feel like I'm learning so much. So I use GarageBand on my Mac when I'm recording like solo or the intro, outro. Mm-hmm. And sometimes there's like other sounds from my computer. Not very often. It's usually like I have to restart everything, make sure everything's, but I get what you're saying.
Yeah.
And it'd be cool to do a little experiment.
Experimentation is like the heart of finding your audio sound.
Yes.
I used to think it was really high dollar equipment. I used to think it was expertise. It is experimentation and trial and error.
It's true. I shared in a podcast that just went out this week. After 4 years of podcasting, I shared the story of how I was using my microphone backwards for 30 episodes. My audio editor was like, I don't know why your sound is so terrible. I was like in a full-on blanket fort, but still speaking to the wrong side of the microphone.
But those 30 episodes probably had a lot of value for your listeners.
Yep, nobody noticed like I did. I was
Exactly.
like sweating in a blanket fort thinking, how am I going to do this with guests? Anyway.
Yeah. Oh man, I can relate to so many moments like that.
Okay, so you use Audacity, and that can be used on any PC.
Yeah, any PC, any Mac.
Okay.
Yeah, it's open source software, so it's free. There's a lot of tutorials about downloading it and installing it, and you used to have to kind of install a plugin too, but I think you actually don't these days. It's a little bit complicated, but it's well worth the investment of probably 30 minutes to go just see how to install Audacity on your device. But the thing about Audacity, or probably any audio editing software, is it can take your slightly noisy audio where you might have messed some stuff up, or you're reading your meditation script and the wrong words come out of your mouth. All you have to do is you open that audio, you run a few simple processing procedures on that audio. It cleans up the background noise. It'll help to level out the volume of your voice. And then it's super easy to just go in and sort of trim out the things you want to get rid of. So I actually have a mini course. It's a little bit under construction right now, but by the time this episode comes out, it should be fully ready to go. So I have a little course that'll guide you through this process because it's difficult to really describe properly just with audio. But there's really 3 basic functions that I end up using every time I create a meditation or a podcast track. Basically, you start by some noise removal, because anytime you record, you'll get a little bit of background noise, but as long as it's not too bad, you can remove it and it shouldn't decrease the audio quality. The second thing is to run the normalize function. So you just select all of your audio and click normalize. And again, there's videos for this in the course that will be live by the time this goes out. And then the third thing is to compress the audio. And basically, once you've done that, you've really taken your phone recording up a level from just everyone can tell you recorded it on your phone,
Right.
to making it sound a little bit more polished. When you normalize it, it kind of standardizes the audio level to help it not be too quiet or too loud. And it ends up just sounding much more polished. And also it gives you the freedom as you're recording to make mistakes.
Right.
And not worry about it, because you're going to go through and listen to the entire track. If there's some noise in the background you didn't catch, it's easy to silence it or trim it out. Again, these are things you can find in my little short mini free course. But it really helps to give that sense for me that I can kind of experiment and relax into the flow of recording the meditation without worrying too much, like, oh no, am I going to mess up something?
Right. This is so important. When I would mess up, I still mess up all the time on the podcast, and I just keep talking now. I used to go back and start again. Sometimes I will if it's like a really long stretch, but I usually just say, okay, Susan, can you take that out? Or why did I just say that? Or I'm like, I just keep tripping over the same word. The one thing that I've learned is do not sound ticked off by the 4th time you say it. If you're like, why can't I get this out? You can hear it through the audio. It's like, try and smile. It was Amanda Kingsmith, who's a podcaster, shared with me that her and her husband, they both have podcasts, and they have a podcast company, like what do you call that? What is that called? A network.
I know what you mean.
Podcast
network. There we go.
They put a pen in their mouth, and there's this picture of 4 of us doing a workshop of like trying it, because you can't not smile. So they'll run around their house a little bit. That doesn't sound very safe, but with this pen in their mouth, because you can hear that.
Yes.
Is there anything that you can think of in terms of like getting that meditation quality? Like, that's not what I'm doing on the podcast. I don't really want people to be like falling asleep. Maybe they do. But if that was the goal, was like rest or relaxation, what tips do you use?
I would say take a moment before you start recording to settle into your own meditative space. You mentioned that really how you're feeling comes across so clearly in your voice. And I think that's a lot of what's actually beneficial about listening to a guided meditation is that whoever's guiding it is like leading you into the state of mind that they're experiencing. And I listen to a lot of tracks on Insight Timer. I'm a huge fan of theirs. I also am a teacher on there, so feel free to look me up there and check out some of my work. You'll hear some of the earlier work is highly imperfect. But you can hear sometimes that someone is just reading a script.
Right.
And it sounds very different from when you can just hear in their voice that they're settled into that state. And what I find is often, even though I'm reading a script that's pre-recorded, I'm kind of also having that experience at the same time. And that's another reason that I like having a script. It kind of just helps me relax and settle into the actual experience of the meditation rather than trying to think, what am I going to say next? So I think the more you can hold that space for yourself, take just a few minutes before starting, like hitting record. I like to record, if possible, at least the first version of that script. I like to record it actually in my meditation space so that it feels organic. And then I might be, recording. I have a little box with acoustic foam in it. So I might be recording in that. I might be recording in a closet. But if I can try and bring to mind, sort of the origin of that meditation, it helps me settle in, and it helps me actually do the practice instead of just reading the practice.
Oh, that's amazing. Those are great tips. Thanks. A lot of our connected yoga teachers ask about Insight Timer. I also love it. I love that it tells me how many days in a row I've done my meditation.
Yeah.
I love like ding, you got your circle and you're winning. Like it feels really good. How do you have any tips for getting on Insight Timer? I thought someone said recently like they're not taking new teachers at this point. I'm not sure if that's true.
Oh, I have not heard that. I would love to do a little deep dive on teaching on Insight Timer if that's okay.
Yeah.
Great. So I had not heard that it might be difficult or maybe there's a waiting list or something now to get on as a teacher. When I started years and years ago, honestly, I just had some practices I wanted to share. So it was easy to get on. So I don't know how to speak to that question of whether or not it's still just a simple process of registering for a teacher account. But once you do that, basically you have a teacher dashboard and you can upload tracks, you can upload podcast episodes, you can upload teachings, you can upload music, you can set up live events. So there's a whole array of ways that you can connect with people on Insight Timer. And part of the reason I'm so stoked about Insight Timer as a content creator is that with social media, if you go out there on Instagram or Twitter or whatever, first of all, Instagram is very visually focused, so it's hard to share audio stuff.
Yes.
You can take a meditation track and just use, a basic video editor and put some images with it. So now you have a video, but if you don't want to have to do that, it's hard to share audio sometimes. And also, your people are kind of like a needle in a haystack in like the broader social media space. But with Insight Timer, it's full of your people.
Right.
And it's just lovely. So anyway, that's my unpaid promotion for Insight Timer. But I have been relatively recently just starting to take advantage of all the things it offers for like really connecting to like your people. And there are thousands of teachers on there. So it's a large marketplace. It's easy to get lost in the crowd. But for instance, my main focus right now in my like main business is on rebirth, the death and rebirth process in Tibetan Buddhism. And also metaphorically, how those teachings can help us navigate transitions. So like if I'm on, I don't know, Twitter, and I'm trying to talk about like the Tibetan Book of the Dead, it's crickets. Like I'm getting nothing.
Twitter's like, update us on news or politics, please.
Yeah, exactly. I'm sorry, you're not shouting and angry about something? We're not interested. But on Insight Timer, I've been doing this series of live events on the 4 Bardo states in Tibetan Buddhism. And I think something like over 60 people showed up to one of them, which is not a lot. You'll see people doing these live events with like sometimes thousands of people attending, but for me, it's a lot. And it just really feels like, you know, a direct connection with people who are the most likely to take these teachings and use them. So Insight Timer is fabulous for that. And as you go through the process of uploading a track, like say you've created your track, you've listened to it, it's good, you want to share it. As you go through to upload that track, you have all these options for basically letting people know how to find it. So you can choose what tradition it's coming from, what the benefits are. I don't know what the algorithms and sort of the behind the scenes part of Insight Timer is in terms of how people find your tracks. But you have an incredible amount of detail in terms of describing what's in it, what traditions it's related to. There's a lot of keywords you can use. So it's a really great way to get your teachings and your meditations in the hands of the people who are most likely to benefit from them. And honestly, you know, I have over 800 some odd followers on Insight Timer, and until maybe like 3 months ago, I never thought about trying to grow that audience. So this was all accidental growth, which is to me kind of mind-blowing when I think about how difficult it is to grow on, you know, other social media platforms.
That's amazing. Well, I'm a big fan of Insight Timer, and when they started doing the live things, my mom was like, have you been on Insight Timer lately? She is loving that you can show up to things live. And yeah, I highly recommend that yoga teachers check that out if you haven't. And this is making me think maybe we want to chat with the people over at Insight Timer and ask some questions.
Please do. Please do.
Great news, Connected Yoga teachers. We actually have an episode coming up next week with a yoga teacher who is using and loving Insight Timer. So we asked all the questions for you. Make sure that you are subscribed so that you don't miss it when it releases. Our podcast goes out each and every Monday, and I'm so excited that we could put these two together. This week's where we talk about audio, and then next week where we talk about Insight Timer, which has a lot of audio on that site. Okay, let's get back to our conversation with Claire.
I actually searched on YouTube when I was like, oh, wait, maybe I could deliberately cultivate students on Insight Timer. I searched on there on YouTube for how to grow on Insight Timer. And if you search like how to grow on Instagram, you just get, there's probably millions of videos. I got 0 videos. So I think this is a huge opportunity for the Insight Timer people, and honestly for the rest of us who have something to share on Insight Timer. I mean, it's not exactly getting in at the ground floor. There's thousands of people on it, but I think there's a huge growth right now in all sorts of audio content. And I think it's a great time to get active on there as a teacher.
Mm-hmm. Oh, this is so cool. So doing our own audio and sending that out to our students, this has been another question. Once we have it edited and it's all ready to go, many people say, how do I share this? One person the other day said, I don't care how you share it. I'm a student. Make sure it doesn't shut off like a meditation to go to sleep. It's awful if the phone shuts down and then the voice starts talking.
Oh, no. Like if that happens in the guided meditation, or like if the app on the phone doesn't keep going.
However, the first time that their teacher sent audio, it would play as long as the phone screen was on, which I know something like YouTube will do that, right?
Yeah. Okay, so here's my pitch for another app.
I love this.
I'm not getting paid for any of them.
You should be.
Yeah, there we go. I should set up some affiliate links. So I had this question, as I was setting up my website for my business and thinking about, okay, I have these meditation tracks. How do I share them? Basically, what I wanted was YouTube for audio. Because if you're going to host the audio yourself, it gets expensive. I mean, you can set up a podcast and pay as little as $5 a month, something like that. But you're still paying $5 a month. And I was like, where's the free option? So turns out there's a free option, which probably a lot of folks have heard of if they're into podcasting, and it's Anchor.
Oh, yes.
Anchor, like what you drop from a boat. And the thing is, they kind of describe themselves as YouTube for audio. So they allow you to set up a free account. You're basically setting up a podcast, but I have a podcast there. My main podcast is called Letting Grow. If you're interested in rebirth, literally or metaphorically, please check it out. But I set up a little podcast on Anchor. I think it's just called Meditate with Claire. I just randomly chose a name because I'm not interested in growing it as a podcast, but every time you post an episode to your Anchor podcast, you get an embed code. So you can basically put that audio anywhere. You also get links to share it. And so basically Anchor is structured as a podcast app. So that means I can put, an hour-long sleep meditation on my podcast. All somebody has to do is download that podcast episode and then listen to it through their podcast app, whatever app that is, and it's not going to shut off. And it's a great way for, promoting a course, or, if you're kind of come out with a 6-pack of your favorite sleep meditations, here's one for free, check it out. And the fact that it doesn't cost you anything to have that service is, to me, a really big upside.
Yeah, that is. Okay, so Anchor is the place to do that. And then we can put it in an email, or we could share it on social media some way.
Exactly. You embed it in your newsletter, or, you share a link to it on social media. It's a really simple way to share content. And if you actually want to grow a podcast, that's a whole other question, but you can do it using that app as well.
Oh, that's so great. Is there anything else that you think yoga teachers might want to know about audio and sharing audio?
Yeah, I think, this is not necessarily a fact as much as a mindset issue. I think it is better to put stuff out there and get feedback and grow than to hold back because you think you're not good enough. I started on Insight Timer a few years ago, and, really with no intention other than I just had tracks I wanted to be able to share with people. But I've gotten great feedback about my voice and how I speak, and, how much time people like to have after the end of a meditation, before the final bell, all these little details I never would have thought about. And, sharing specifically on Insight Timer has been a great way to help me feel more confident as somebody leading meditations. And I think especially if you're a yoga teacher and you feel a little bit reluctant, or maybe, unqualified to be doing this, just start and see what happens. It'll help you grow. And odds are you actually have something to say that's going to resonate with a certain group of people.
Oh, that's amazing. So how can our listeners connect with you further? What website should they go to find that course, and how do they find your podcast?
Yeah. So I have a very basic website called Dharmapreneurs. I can send you a link to it, and they can find the link to sign up for that course there. You can also find more of my sort of main offerings at clairevillarreal.com. And my podcast is called Letting Grow, like grow like a plant. And it's all about, transitions.
That's amazing. Thank you so much for all of this, Claire. I feel like this has been some really like step-by-step how we get the audio out there to our students. Thank you for your time.
You're most welcome. It has totally been my pleasure.
Alrighty, connected yoga teachers, I want to hear from you. First of all, thank you again so much, Claire, for sharing this really step-by-step process. And if our connected yoga teachers want to learn more from you, I'm so glad that you have a course all set up, and we'll link to that in the show notes. And I'm excited to see how our connected yoga teachers use this in whatever way to share audio with their yoga students or potential yoga students. If you heard today's episode and it's inspiring to you and you're thinking, yes, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to create a freebie to get people to sign up for my email list, and it's going to be audio, or I'm going to create a gift for my existing students, or I'm going to create some type of audio that I put up for sale or put in my membership. I want to hear from you. Let us know how you are using this in your business. Share it in the Facebook group if you're a member of our Connected Yoga Teacher community over there, or send us a voice message or tag us on a social media platform. We love to hear from you. I am feeling full of gratitude to you for showing up here today, for listening to the podcast, for taking the time to dig in and learn through all of the tech conversation today as well. And thank you for guiding us in such a clear way today, Claire. It's been a real gift. I also want to give a huge shout out of thank you to our entire team over here, Suzanne, Crunch, Sinead, Erica. Thank you so much for all of the work that you do for our podcast, for our pelvic health professionals, for our entire community of people and listeners. It's amazing. Alrighty, you know the question I'm going to ask if you've been here for any length of time. I want to know, what will you be doing this week to stay connected to yourself, your yoga practice, and to your community so that you can share the yoga that lights you up? If you can say your name the way you pronounce it for me right now.
Sure. So my name is Claire Villarreal. You can also just say Villarreal if that's easier.
Villarreal, but can you say it again?
Sure, Villarreal.
And it must be French.
It's actually Spanish. My dad's from Mexico. Yeah.
Look at me. I'm like, well, you rolled an R and then I thought you're French.
I have the name that fits in well in Quebec, even though all my ancestry is like, Anglo and Hispanic.
That's amazing.